Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In view of the tragic events outside Westminster yesterday, in particular the death of PC Keith Palmer, Aisha Frade and Kurt Cochran and all those who were injured, I appreciate if you could stand for a minute's silence. Thank you. Right, item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Mark Wilkinson and Councillor John Strachan. Item 2 on agenda, are there any declarations of interest? Noted. The minutes on pages 4 to 7 of the agenda, can I take these as an accurate record?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Just sign those accordingly. Are there any matters arising? Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask a question at the bottom of page 4 and at the beginning of page 5 about the Pets Corner. I was on the working group with John Strachan and Maggie Holcomb, and one of the things we looked at was making more use of the dog grooming park. As we are coming into the summer, spring, summer, and this is the time when a lot of people would use such a facility, I wonder if there's any progress on it.
Oh, you're going to hear more about this. You get to say
I'm suddenly an expert on dog grooming. We haven't completely discounted the idea, but it does go fundamentally against what the principles of Pets Corner is, and what we need to be able to do is that unit was set up as part of the regulations to make sure that the grooming was done for the animals that we have responsibility for. The concerns that have been expressed that whilst it's a good idea as probably a small business, what we have to ensure is that we maintain and ensure that we meet with the regulations to ensure that that facility is used for its purpose. There is a wider debate then that needs to be taking place about the appropriateness of having what could be viewed as a private industry working from a public environment that is free at the point of delivery. So all I'm simply saying is that it's not a definite no, but I think there are some questions, fundamental questions that need to be resolved first, because actually what we don't, and then say for instance if it is going to be a dog grooming, would we then have to go out to some sort of tendering process and offer that space for anybody, just because we've got someone who works for us that happens to be able to cut dogs, may not be appropriate. So there's a lot of questions that need to be asked, but there is an open discussion about it, if that assures you.
Okay, thank you.
No other matters arising? Right, so item 5, there are no written questions from the public. Item 6, no written questions from councillors. Item 7, no petitions. The forward plan on pages 8 to 13. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Probably won't come as too much of a surprise, but we're asking about the date for the local development plan. It's penciled in June 17, but to be confirmed, I'm just wondering in light of the council meeting last week, whether the administration has been able to firm that up at all.
So, my understanding is there will be a report to Cabinet in June. But we're obviously trying to avoid the PERDA period in the intervening space. It is still the intention to have a plan for approval for consultation and then consultation this calendar year, but it is unlikely it is going to be before Cabinet in June. I don't know if Councillor Purden got to add anything to that.
No, I can't add anything to that, Chair.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments on the local plan? Sorry, forward plan even? Lots of questions about the local plan.
Well,
So noted. Item 9, no decisions taken outside the normal process by the leader of the portfolio holders. So careful with running this particular item.
You
Right.
always get a chuckle on that one,
No,
don't you?
indeed. Yes, moving on. So, item 10, the joint finance and performance report on pages 14 to 40.
So moved, Chair.
And I will second. I don't know if you want to recommend your remarks.
Well, generally speaking, Chair, the service budget's maintained with a current forecast underspend of 314,000, which is 0.5% of the general fund budget. And overall, the final general fund outturn is projecting an underspend of 481,000 after the proposal to actually transfer 500,000 to the Regeneration Enterprise Reserve. There's explanations of where these monies have come from. The additional monies from the garages, in fact, is going into the budget next year. It was just something that was not overlooked as such, but with the transfer partly of the garages coming into the general fund, the rent increase changed. So generally, the general reserves are going up to 4.2 million, which is much above the expectation for what we need to actually have as a reserve. So we're erring on the side of prudence at the moment, and there might be some possibility of spending some monies in the future, new monies.
Yeah, I'll just say, again, tight financial control, very small variances and an underspend, which is obviously welcome. Generally, there are, in terms of the performance indicators, strong performance. There are clearly some exceptions, which I'm no doubt will be raised shortly. I'm obviously quite keen to see next quarter's performance indicators, which will cover the transition in the final month of the quarter from KIA onto HGS. So, are there any questions? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chairman. It's on the actual performance rather than financial performance. Obviously, we welcome the improvement in the call rate at the time of the calls of the call centre. And on page 15, paragraph 8A, there is mention to the number of complaints rising by 10%. But there doesn't appear to be any explanation as to why things are getting that much worse.
I think it's worth pointing out that it's 10% worse than this time last year, although this is the second best performance in terms of number of complaints in the last year and a half. If you look at the graph on page, if I can just find it, I can't. On page 23, yeah, indeed. But I don't know if you want to make any other remarks about that.
There was no anything to put a finger on the exact reason, like John said. It is one of the lowest, but yeah, there is. We're looking to it and try and make sure for next time that's going. There's no definite reason we say this is one instance, in particular.
So things generally are getting worse.
So you look at roughly page 23. This is the second best performance since October 2015. and it is slightly worse than the equivalent month last year, but so they're not getting worse. They were worse last year.
The volume of complaints has increased by 10%. Okay, thank you much.
Are there no other questions or comments? Right. So then, in that case, the recommendations on page 13, A and B, noting the projected outturn and transfers to reserve set out in Appendix A. Are we so agreed?
Agreed.
So moving on to item 11, the HRA Q3 finance report on pages 41 to 49.
So moved, Chair.
I will second that. Again, Mike, do you want to make any interruptions?
The general fund good control continues to be maintained on service budgets. The forecast underspend on service-specific budgets of £500,000 and the underspend of 4 million. But at the end of the day, one's got to take into account the government changes to housing finance, and really it's being prudent because the housing budget now increasingly is going to be under strain because of what the government has imposed upon us. Not only imposed an enormous debt, but they've actually taken the rug under our feet in terms of being able to pay for the repairs and maintenance of the housing properly. And that obviously is of a concern. The money will have to be carried forward for that.
Any questions? Councillor Carter?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just pick up on Councillor Dander's point. The working balance on the HRA is projected to be 10.2 million by the end of the year, which is over or twice what the minimum revenue balance is. I have a couple of questions. One is this money actually being earmarked for the purposes that Councillor Dander suggested to cover the shortfall in the rent over the next 3 years? And does it include the £1 million achieved through right to buy sales, which is also higher than forecast? And whilst I have the floor, I'll just have the one question. I know Councillor Danvers keeps on referring to the debt that the council took over a few years ago, but we're paying considerably less than we were under the old scheme when we were losing a third of our rental income to the government.
The answer to the question is yes, because of the rent reduction. So there has to be a new plan in terms of housing finance. It is concerning to a degree how that's gone. Council house sales here are higher, and that once again, in its turn, actually has problems as well as perhaps for the lucky beneficiaries of public money of actually being able to purchase their properties at a discount. But generally speaking, you made us debt free, rightly or wrongly. We had, it's history, isn't it? £60 million in the bank, and you frittered it away in terms of making us debt free. And then we're now landed with another debt of over 200 million. Your administration in 2002 or 2003, when you came in, you paid off the £60 million of housing debt at that time, and that was crazy. Now we're actually saddled with a debt of 200 million from the government, and there's no getting away from it. It's a millstone around this authority's neck.
Sorry, Joe, if I may just follow that up. If it is the council's intention to increase the working balance on the HRA, then why is there no recommendation coming from Section 151 officer to actually achieve that, rather than just bumbling along, collecting money left, right and centre?
Yeah, of course.
If I can just respond to the question, just point out that at paragraph 9 of the report on page 44, the projected working balance as approved by council in February was actually 10.2 million. So we're only just marginally above that recommended balance that was agreed at council.
with respect, that's a projected working balance and not a minimum working balance, as is usual on both the HRA and the general fund.
Yeah, it's somewhat
Yeah, so the working balance is very close to the projected working balance. That's no surprise. Are there any further questions or comments on the HRA report? Right, so in that case, the recommendation on page 41 that we note the favourable variation in the HRA and note the forecast balances, which I note was in line with the forecast balances at Council A and B. I also agree.
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 12, which is the Capital Programmes Quarterly Financial Report on pages 51 to 64.
So moved, Chair.
And I will second. Anything particularly you want to sign? No. Any questions or comments? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. It's only a comment. It's paragraph A2 of Annex A. Members may be aware that there was a major fire at a block of flats, Lakenhall House in South London about 6 years ago. Southwark Council were eventually fined £300,000 and £400,000 costs for their negligence there. And therefore, it's very welcome and reassuring that on the Housing Capital Programme, there's 1.3 million allocated to undertake fire risk works as part of the Council's statutory compliance duties. I have already discussed this with the Head of Housing, who reassures me that risk assessments are undertaken every 2 years on high-rise flats. I did also suggest that perhaps in the right context this kind of information could be provided to our tenants and leaseholders, that obviously it's not my role to support the administration, but reassure them that the landlord is aware and cognisance of the various issues and taking all the steps they can to protect them.
Yes, absolutely, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Is there no further? Oh, sorry, Councillor Johnson. Is there no further? Oh, sorry, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Table 2 of the report, the Housing Programme 16-17, which details out budget versus current spend and projected outturn. Disabled adaptations, 1106, 1.1 million basically, with a net spend date of 600,000. Says that we've got a projected outturn still of 1.1 million. That's £500,000 to spend in the last quarter. Is that realistic, given we've only spent 600,000 in 3 quarters to date? The other question to do with that, Mr. Chairman, is that the note against that line, disabled adaptation, says paragraph 8. Paragraph 8 is about housing capital programme. Paragraph 7 appears to be the additional 200,000 for disabled adaptation. So I wonder if the note is wrong. And if so, the £200,000 additional budget listed in 7, is that on top of the 1.1 million already there? In which case it furthers the question that I'm asking about: can we spend that money in time before year end?
The budget for the disabled adaptation at Council Johnson has probably been amended 2 or 3 times in 2017. That recognises the demand-led nature of that vulnerable service. The 1.1 million includes that 200,000, and there is high confidence that could be spent double because of the waiting list having the budget against demand. So there's a high level of confidence that we spend by year.
Can I come back there? In which case, why have we only spent 640,000 up to quarter 3 if there's been such a demand on the budget? I would have expected to see the budget fully spent up to quarter 3 and then the additional money being fed in to cope with the additional demand.
Councillor, there's a process and protocol for authorisation in terms of the work being done and the work being signed off, and there's always a time lag for that, and that will continue. I reiterate the point: demand far exceeds the budget available. With that budget starting in 2012 around 500,000, it's gone up to 1.9 million. It could be 2.2 million because of the demand required for that service.
Any further comments or questions? So I I would just note that we have to approve the specific business cases in item B, so label order 1 to 11. Don't particularly got to go through them unless anyone does, but when making a decision, be constant of those, including refurbishment of the Nichols Field multi-use games area, amongst other things, and the so-called toilet near Pep's Corner, which actually is actually in progress. Actually,
It is.
so not sure how that happened before the approval. Never mind. Right. So the recommendations on page 50 and 51, A and B. Are we so agreed?
Agreed.
Right, so that brings us to item 13, HMO annual licensing on pages 65 to 69.
Mr. Chair, is to remove an anomaly that existed between the term of a licence for HMOs, houses of multiple occupation. The mandatory HMOs that were originally introduced some 10 years ago had a 5-year span. The council then introduced an additional licensing scheme for HMOs that didn't need to be licensed under the mandatory scheme. The mandatory scheme required HMOs that had 3 or more stories or 5 or more tenants to be licensed. Because of the nature of housing in Harlow, we had quite a small number of those compared to the total number of HMOs. So a discretionary scheme was introduced for the HMOs that fell outside of the mandatory qualified. The discretionary ones had a period of 1 year for the licence, and this report is proposing to bring the mandatory HMOs in line with the discretionary, in that they'll all have a 1-year licence that have to be renewed on an annual basis, which obviously enables checks to be made. Just to give Cabinet some indication of the scale of HMO licences, at the moment there's 56 mandatory HMOs, which is 3 or more stories, 5 or more tenants. There's 162 discretionary, which obviously is below those standards for quantities. There's also a small number pending, which are under consideration or applied and still yet to receive their licence. And there's 11 cases where there's a reason to suspect multiple occupation, which we are investigating. Obviously, we cannot be aware of instances of multiple occupation where the landlord was not applied for a licence unless we receive intelligence or it comes about through data discrepancies. But we obviously follow up every piece of information in case there is a house in multiple occupation that has not applied for a licence. The reasons for these regulations is obviously to, as far as we can, ensure that tenants in houses of multiple occupation are protected from fire risk, have minimal standards in terms of facilities that are available to them, and they have at least a minimum amount of space to obviously reside. That's the purpose of these regulations, which are effected by means of a licence. So that's just a bit of background, but obviously the report is proposing that we move the term for the mandatory licences to 12 months, so that it's it in line with the term for the discretionary licences. I so move, Chair.
Yeah, in essence, this is about sort of equalising the inspection period for the two types, and I know that will be welcome by a number of residents who are concerned about the impact, not always negative, but can be negative if not properly managed on their neighbours. I ought to mention Sheila Sullivan, who has often been in this chamber as a campaigner on this issue, and probably the most knowledgeable person I've ever met on HMOs, who happens to live in my ward. I've met her on a number of occasions. Are there any other questions or comments on this particular report?
Just a formality, is it being seconded?
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, wearing one of my other hats without declaring interest through Streets to Homes, we have an interest in HMOs. And we also need to ensure, members of both the council and the charity, that our residents are living in safe and secure accommodation. I did have concerns when the discretionary scheme first came out, because Street Homes did lose a number of landlords who just thought this was the straw that broke the camel's back, in terms of bureaucracy and cost. Anyway, that being said, so it has to be welcome, it has to be done properly, humanely. What I'm primarily concerned about at this stage is, correct me if I'm wrong, we're moving the mandatory properties from 5-year licensing to 1-year licensing. So they have to be licensed every year instead of every 5 years. So I'm just wondering, bearing in mind the struggle we had to get the discretionary ones licensed, whether we've got resources to carry out all that bureaucracy and carry out all those inspections.
Yes, Chair. Well, obviously, they're not new licences every year, they're renewal of the licence every year instead of every 5 years. But Councillor Carter's quite right. Even though there's only, did I say 65?
56.
56. Sorry, 56. 56 mandatory licences. The fact that they'll move from a 5-year renewal to 1-year renewal will obviously require more resources. But this is something we feel is necessary and obviously will be taken account of in the budget.
So I mean, just general comment from me, I absolutely understand the need to balance the valuable provision of affordable accommodation, particularly in the space you referred to. I've had a number of conversations with Kerry Homes on this subject, but balancing that with the need to provide at least a minimum set of standards, which for the majority of landlords shouldn't be an overly onerous requirement. But it is about making sure we keep that sort of at least minimum set of standards. We keep them sort of under review, and in addition to the comments we've made about fire safety and the like, that the impact on the neighbourhood is also maintained. It is a balancing act. My personal belief is that balancing is right, and it is also right to equalise the inspection and licensing regime across statutory HMOs and the additional licensing scheme that's council subject.
So the elephant in the corner of the room on all of this is how you actually identify all the discretionary HMOs. Councillor Burton was saying just now that you're heavily reliant on intelligence, i.e. people complaining about them. In order to ensure a uniform service across the town, there has to be a better way of ensuring that all HMOs are being picked up. And I would have assumed there would have been a process organised before you actually started on this, ways of sort of checking or analysing or monitoring where HMOs actually exist, which should be.
That is obviously an interesting point. Right? Just further information I can give to the meeting is that we've received intelligence on 79 addresses. And that intelligence comes for various reasons. It could be complaints of noise, which suggest multiple occupation, domestic waste management issues, council tax records, historical records of previous multiple occupation, housing options and advice referrals, planning inquiries, and obviously the electoral roll, which sometimes there is an obvious giveaway to houses of multiple occupation. But these are ways in which we consider that we manage to identify most of the houses in multiple occupation. The fact that our communities in Harlow, compared to, say, in big cities, like especially like London, where hardly anybody knows anybody else, in Harlow we're fortunate in that communities are fairly long established. And I think when something changes, it's fairly quick to be noticed. And so I think intelligence, in other words, people reporting things that are unusual or have changed, I think it's a fairly effective way in a town like Harlow to identify something that has changed. Obviously we can't be sure we're picking up every case, but I think we're picking up most of them. I'm not sure that implementing a more formal investigative process, which would itself require more resources, is necessarily going to be effective in terms of numbers.
Clearly, it's going to be a foolproof system, but it is about catching the majority. It gives a mechanism where there are complaints from neighbours to investigate and to send a clear message that this council will not tolerate this sort of coordination in this house. Right, if there are no further comments or questions, then the recommendations A and B on page 64, are we so agreed? Agreed. Right, move on to item 14, the procurement of domestic waste and recycling collection services. Councillor
As it states in the report, the present contract, which is with Harlow, which has been extended, finally expires at the end of June next year and cannot be further extended. We therefore intend to commence the procurement process for a new contract in order to ensure that we have a continuity of service. We hope to have completed the tendering process by the end of this calendar year, which will then give us six months for mobilisation if we end up with a different contractor. We have, as members will see in the report, we have engaged a specialist consultant to examine our present service and to propose or examine any possible changes that might be beneficial to the public and to the authority. I have to say that all the different possible options for change do not appear to give us an advantage in it or to be advantageous to the public. So we're basically intending to proceed with a procurement of a similar service in its broad outlines. In other words, a 2-weekly collection of 3 different types of waste. As the report points out, we may have to, or we certainly will have to cease the food collections from flats because the government grant that was being used to finance that additional service will come to an end. And service. It's different in Harlow from many of our surrounding authorities, mainly because of the nature of the town. It's considered that we may be able to, in negotiations with the possible contractors, we may be able to offer an enhanced green collection service with a proper bin, but that will be, as I say, negotiated with the possible contractors. I've also raised the possibility of the bulky collections, or old furniture, anything people want to dispose of, being run under the contract, but with the involvement of a voluntary sector, a third-party contractor, who could possibly be much more flexible than a large contractor, with what is basically a very personal type of service. But that will have to be looked into to see whether that's going to be beneficial to the customers and to the authority. So there are a number of things that will be considered during the procurement process, but the tender procurement documentation will be directed mainly at achieving the standard, most economic service for the standard features of waste collection and responsibilities, obviously within quality standards. We anticipate there's likely to be up to 6 companies will be tendering, so we will get a good comparison and the other have indicated that they're very keen to try and win the contract again, and I think that we will be satisfied with the quality that they've been able to offer so far. So this report is asking for us to decide to proceed to procure a domestic waste and recycling collection contractor, that we delegate authority to approve the documentation to the head of place in consultation with myself, and that the Cabinet receive a further report on the outcome of the procurement process and the appointment of the preferred bidder.
The question is, Graham, first you've got the local plan, now you've got the waste contract. Does someone think you weren't busy? I mean, I don't envy your position, Graham, at all. My first question is just, I've got a number of technical questions, because of course you would appreciate we went through this exercise when we were in administration, so we recognise the challenges that there are with the waste and recycling contract. But the first question I had, and I think it was borne out in the report, is what discussions has the administration had with Essex County Council, other local authorities, because of course across the county you have a number of different variations, and it would just be interesting to know at a high level what those discussions have been. I used to attend the meeting at Council Hall about the inter-authority discussions of waste and recycling, and it'd just be interesting to see where other authorities are and where Essex are at the moment in terms of the debate about waste and recycling across the counties.
I can make some general remarks. So it has been discussed, although I must confess, not recently very much. And the basic problem was the thing you alluded to, which was that each area both had different circumstances in terms of geographic coverage, say urban or rural nature, the layout of housing and the like. And also, shall we just say, different aspirations and outlooks on how it should be handled. I think in summary, the Essex leaders and chief executives, where this was discussed, couldn't reach agreement on either a pan-Essex or an Essex quadrant basis. And it's certainly not been on the agenda of the Essex chief executives for the last several months. By several, I possibly mean a year. I can't actually recall the last time it was discussed. I don't know whether either Graham or there's anything else to add to that. But clearly there is a relationship between waste collection and waste disposal. So, beyond the obvious. So we're the waste collection authority. Essex are the waste disposal authority. I'm sure there'll be further ongoing discussions about the actual join between those two things in terms of transfer stations and all that sort of stuff. And there have been some, shall we say, controversial decisions by Essex County Council in respect of transfer stations not far from Harlow, but not in Harlow. I'm thinking specifically around the Hastings roundabout that I think Forest District Council weren't overly happy with. I don't know what anything else to add to that unless.
I think you've summed up well, Jim.
The next question I have, of course, when we were in administration, we went through the full procurement exercise, and there was good, healthy competition. A range of organisations came to Harlow. We did a bus tour of some of the unique areas like Bishopsfield, where they used to have the train to do the waste and so on. But in terms of this procurement exercise, what are the broad strategic aims? Of course, we can't talk about the weighting that will be put on certain topics. I wouldn't imagine to go into that discussion tonight. But what are the key areas that the council will look at in terms of assessment, whether it's finance, service design and so on? Just at a high strategic level, could I get an understanding from the administration about those broad principles?
Pluses and minuses. We consider the existing arrangements are the best arrangements for Harlow, but we are going to build into the procurement documents the opportunity for bidders to come forward with any innovation which they would like to offer. But at the end of the day, subject to our quality thresholds, obviously we have to be mainly concerned with the economics. In respect of possibly the biggest variable, which is the recycling costs, at the moment the existing contract pays the contractor a standard fee for the collection and disposal of recycling waste. We then receive a grant from the county in respect to the fact that we are disposing of the recycling on their behalf. One of the problems with that arrangement, which became apparent when we looked to extend the existing contract, was that there is a large variable in the price that can be achieved for recycled products, especially plastics, dependent on the price of oil at any particular stage, and therefore that is a variable which we, in order to extend the existing contract, we had to enter into a cost sharing or profit sharing, depending on the price of oil, arrangement with the contractor for that particular aspect of the service. We anticipate that that's probably the most effective way to proceed with a new contract, which would enable us to get a decent start price for the recycling collection and disposal. But I think that, as you've already said, Chair, the situation of waste collection in Harlow is, I'm not going to say it's unique, but it's certainly different to many of our surrounding authorities in terms of its urban nature.
So just I sort of there is in the report a breakdown of the key criteria. I will simply add to that clearly it will be cognizant of this council's procurement policy, which includes social value as an element of that. So of course a variety of issues, whether that's apprentices, training recognition, and minimum wage, broad corporate social responsibility, and retaining as much of Harlow's council spend in the Harlow economy as possible.
Why is there no mention of the nappy waste or incontinence waste collection in this report and the actual spend?
We don't intend to change it.
Great. In terms of the Annex A, it does a useful breakdown of some of the variances in the options. And I noticed the language in the report where the council briefed the consultants to look at a range of options. Is there any further detail on some of the modelling? Because of course it's important when you take this decision. I know what the council has said, but there is some interesting wordplay in both the report and then the Annex A of this report. But has the council done any detailed modelling on the impact of what there would be if you moved to three-week collection, or you moved down the collection service to 4 days a week?
Look, clearly, it's right that all the commercial options were explored, about the options for the actual service itself were explored. The broad conclusion is that it's sort of fine as it is. So clearly we're looking for, in terms of the new procurement, making sure we get best value and we'll market test that as appropriate. And clearly if there are specific innovations, I mean, I'm thinking specifically about the treatment of recycling, the separation, the widening of the variety of materials that can be recycled, and that will be taken into consideration. And I've already mentioned social value, which I would be particularly keen to ensure is part of the evaluation criteria.
Mr. Chairman, I was a little concerned when I read this report, and I can't admit to being quite the expert that Joel and Eddie are, having implemented the previous waste contract. But I was a little concerned with the language in the report. I've been a little more reassured this evening by the Cabinet member and in yourself talking about not changing the waste contract, but that's not what the report says. So I look for a little clarity as to, are you looking to change from what we've got at the moment or not, first of all, and then I'll maybe come out with some detail.
So in the broad structure, both in the commercial arrangements, I was still looking for a commercial operator. We're not looking at changing the commercial arrangements, either running it in-house or some
for the residents and stuff.
or from the basic structure of the collection, both in terms of the number of bins, how often they're collected, the cycle for collecting those things, like alternate week sort of recycling, what have you, with so those broad parameters will be the same. That's not to say that when we get however many bids we get, that there might be some specific proposals from the operators. And
I certainly you always do get variants and curveballs from operators. My concern, therefore, is in sections, paragraphs 13 through 20, where you outline in the report what you're actually doing. The use of the language, the expectation, rather than the plan. And the fact that the expectation of collection frequencies and container types matching current provision, that's not the same as what you and the portfolio holder have said tonight. And that worries me about the language. Further, it also worries me that paragraph 16, the council will invite bids based on the expectation it will not necessarily require separate collection of food waste from flats. And I think not collecting food waste from all of the flats around Harlow is a major change to the current waste collection, which again we've been told tonight isn't going to happen. So again, which is right? Is it the report or what the portfolio holder and the leader are saying? Because I think, I'd love it to be what the portfolio holder and the leader are saying tonight, that you're not intending any changes, because I think what we've got at the moment in the town works really well. There was a lot of hard work went into actually getting the original procurement. That's not what the document before us this evening says.
I think, sorry, Chair, could I just say, I specifically referred to food waste collection from flats, and that we won't be able to proceed with that because the government grant has stopped. The amount of percentage of food waste that we are able to collect from flats is much more than it is from other properties in the town, and it's not considered to be in any way that we can finance ourselves a service which doesn't really...
So to be clear, I think you're over-interpreting the language in the report. It is, as I have said, and as Councillor Burton has said, that there is no plan, expectation or otherwise to change the basic structure, either commercially or in terms of the actual collection, as it is. In terms of the flat block collection, this is specifically referring to the bit that was introduced after the original contract was let, specifically in the funded by a separate government grant, and some pilots were run, nothing else. So I can provide the reassurance that however you might want to interpret the sort of nuances of the language, there's absolutely no intention to change the basic structure, either commercially or in terms of the mechanics of waste collection in Harlow.
I welcome the fact that you're not looking to change it. I know when we did introduce this system originally, a number of your colleagues, you weren't on the council at the time, but I know a number of your colleagues who still are on the council, and indeed sitting around this table, campaigned on a platform of maintaining black bag collections, weekly black bag collections, and were not happy with the current system. So I'm pleased to see that your administration is not looking to change this. Forgive me if I'm a little worried about the language, and I always read the language correctly and make sure there's no loopholes or anything, and I hope there's no loopholes, and I hope I can take you at your word. With regard to the food waste, I accept that there is a loss of a government grant. Will the council be inviting the bidders to come up with innovative ways to maintain the flat block food collection, which obviously isn't in this?
Yes, I'm pleased that Councillor Johnson is pleased, and we will be inviting the tenderers to submit a price and a method for possibly continuing this service, but at the moment we haven't got the finance to do it. So it depends on what the contractors are likely to come forward with.
And clearly the economic viability of doing that will be judged at the time. I mean, look, waste collection, it's probably quite up there with planning and potholes as issues that excise residents a lot. And changing from anything to anything in this space is going to be fraught, controversial, and will undoubtedly introduce a political dimension. And I'm not minded to go to that exercise unless there is a demonstrable and material reason to do so. And from the report we've had, there isn't, so we're not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Andrew said, I was involved in that. I was chairman of the environment at the time, and I'm pleased that we've got what we've got in the town. But I always believe there's room for improvement, so I may have to disagree with my colleagues that I'm not settled that what we've got's there. And I never thought it was there when we first did it. Co-mingled wasn't what I wanted. I wanted separated curbside recycling, but the authority couldn't afford it, and I'm happy to say that. But we did what we could afford, and I'm sure you're looking at the same thing. But there's plastics that we collect in this town, 1 and 2 in triangles. There's also plastics that go 3, 4, 5, 6. And Essex at the time said, we won't be receiving them, but we're working on it. So are we changing Essex that we want to get rid of 3, 4, 5 and 6? That means we can recycle more. And if you're not prepared to do that, are we looking at somebody else taking our plastic away?
So I've already mentioned that we would absolutely welcome any innovations in broadening the range of recyclable materials that can be recycled. And clearly I've alluded to the connection between the waste collection and waste disposal. And currently the disposal authority is County Council, but we would welcome innovative suggestions from bidders for the waste collection contract about alternative ways of disposing of a broader range of recycling. I can't say much more than that until I can see the responses from the market. That's
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I don't have to declare an interest, not being a member of this committee. Having read the consultant report, I was very surprised at the rather, I wouldn't say sort of flippant, but the way they talked down the possibility of going to an LATC. I don't know when the report was written and how far advanced we were with the progress of HTS. But bearing in mind how gung-ho the council was to transfer Keir Harlow to an LATC, it does seem a sort of strange way forward that the council is not considering certainly the option of HTS, which would provide a considerable savings in procurement time and costs, but also in actual delivery. I mean, a number of the issues that the consultant brings up over the existence of an O licence, HTS has an O licence, are there resources either within the council or within HTS to provide back office facilities? You know, HTS it is a £20 million a year company. We've got 350, 360 employees. Yes, we have a health and safety department. Yes, we have an HR department. Yes, we've got finance and so forth. There is an issue over personnel resources. You know, can we find a manager to run it? Well, did you ask us? You know, it's a small contract. Again, that the consultant refers to it. You know, it is a small contract. We may get 6 of a diminishing number of companies to come on and bid for it. But I'm a bit surprised at the way that the council has gone to all the trouble of establishing an LATC group to provide services for the council, and it's just dismissed out of hand. You know, are we actually going to get better value for the residents and the council taxpayers by going to an external company rather than, as you were saying earlier, keeping the Harlow account in Harlow, actually having a Harlow company to provide the service, and in terms of the returns that could be available. You know, you're looking to finance the vehicles for a potential bidder. Why not just go the extra bit further? I mean, can you explain why you're not going the LATC route, or at least allowing an LATC bid to come forward?
So, well, several things. So, first of all, you turned around like gung-ho decisions. On both decisions, we sought independent external advice. You know, there was some commentary at the time about the LATC decision that this was a political decision, but actually it was based on what we felt was right, based on the analysis. This decision, likewise. So, you know, there's a section in here on the risks involved. Waste collection and the relationship between waste collection and waste disposal is a far more specialist area that HGS may or may not have the expertise to do. You know, clearly back to the HGS board, I don't think there's any particular reason why they, unless some of my legal officers say otherwise, why they couldn't bid for the contract. But the point is that, you know, they are fundamentally different, and we've taken the appropriate decision for the appropriate vehicle. This wasn't gung-ho or flippant or in any other form of language that we've used there. It is just, you know, horses for courses. And in this particular case, based on an independent external advice, you know, we've reached the conclusion that this is the most appropriate vehicle for doing it.
Sorry, if I may come back, yes, Clifford was probably rather overhating it, but having gone to all the trouble and risk of setting up an ATC for the bulk of council services, there doesn't seem to be a serious argument or serious consideration given to going the LATC route, bearing in mind all the risks to all the various different options and what the benefits could be.
I disagree. I mean, the report highlights, you know, the risks involved, have you, there's, you know, an analysis, and there was some costing done, yeah, and based on that independent advice, we have, you know, thought we do before Cabinet today. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't use the LATC vehicle for other services. In this particular case, we don't feel it's appropriate, based on independent expert advice that the council has been given, which you might disagree with, but, you know, there we go. Right, any further comments, questions? Right, so item 14 on page 69, recommendations A to C. Also agreed.
Agreed.
Right, moving on to item 15A, referral from Cabinet over working group on the economic development strategy for Harlow.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to move the recommendations on page 147 And I'd also like to thank both Clive Souter and Mark for their contribution in the development of this framework. I do think it was a multi-layered approach, a non-political approach, and certainly I would like to also express my thanks to Julie Houston, who was the officer who led this work, and certainly it's my understanding when I was at the scrutiny committee, the report was well scrutinised. Some amendments were changed as a result of that, and I hope that Cabinet will be able to approve it tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks a lot for making remarks. I mean, clearly, becoming renowned for wittering on about my 4 legs of the stool thing. But basically, this is about making sure that the 4 elements of infrastructure, jobs, housing, and skills come together. And this is reflected in this report in terms of bringing those elements together. I also welcome the recognition of the role that placemaking makes in economic development, in terms of Harlow being an attractive place to live, work, and play. The role that culture and leisure play as well. Clearly, the report talks about a number of aspects in terms of securing jobs and investment, which is broadly going very well. Combination of public health England, the enterprise zone, and obviously we've had before Cabinet recently further investment by Harlow Council in the northern part of the enterprise zone in terms of forward funding infrastructure on site and playing an active role in its build out. There have been encouraging movements around investment in infrastructure, and I commented at the last full council meeting on a slightly different subject around the recognition that the importance of the garden town status has in terms of attracting investment both from government but other partners and the private sector as well. I welcome the report. Clearly, cooperation, collaboration with partners, plural, whether that's surrounding local authorities, the counties of both Essex and Hertfordshire, the private sector, central government is very important. And I know I spend quite of my time on this very subject and lobbying government and others in this space. Clearly, this is another useful piece in the jigsaw, but the test of this will be the action plan that arises out of it. There are a number of specific actions outlined in the report, and I look forward to seeing a more detailed action plan that dovetails with all the other things that are going on in a very positive light in and around Harlow.
Thank you, Chair. Sadly, I wasn't able to attend the committee that's referring this, whichever one it is, to ask the questions there. Just a couple of points. Just seeking clarification. First of all, start off by saying very much welcome to the report. Yes, we do need to wave the flag for Harlow. Harlow is open business. The council needs to be doing all it can to facilitate, not just or say, we're open business, but actually, investing in town centre and so forth. So, obviously, it's very welcome from that point of view. But I'm a bit concerned about or a bit confused about the council's stance on Junction 7A. There are a number of references through the report. New Junction 7A is imperative to the enterprise zone development and therefore delivery of jobs. The council will continue to press the case for construction of the earliest practical opportunity and so forth. This seems to contrast with what the portfolio holder for the environment is saying about Junction 7A. The Junction 7A is only required at the end of the rollout or build out of the enterprise zone, and only when so many houses are built. So, is the council policy to bring on Junction 7A as soon as possible, or in line with the views of the environment portfolio?
It's bring it online as soon as possible, and indeed the recent securing of local government funds has made that not just likely, but going to happen in the very near future. And clearly there is a separate longer-term aspiration for the Northern Bypass, and I was pleased that Essex County Council in their sort of last iteration of designs have made provision for such a thing happening at some point in the future. Clearly there are issues of affordability and funding of that, and the gestation period of such a significant engineering activity. But so the view is quite clear, as it's contained in this report, that we will want it to happen as soon as possible, because yes, it has a hard dependency on build out of the enterprise zone and that its ultimate success. But there is a broader issue around, from my perspective at least, resilience of the network and connections to the motorway network. And I know that there are people in the council and indeed people sat around these tables who have a sort of slightly more nuanced view or different view on the particular location and route. But there we are.
Sorry, if I may continue. On page 166, we're talking about infrastructure, and there's a reference to council will identify any superfast broadband deficits and promote these for early solutions through superfast Essex and other appropriate avenues. In Church Langley, despite being less than a mile from the place where broadband was actually, or fibre optics was actually invented, there are areas where it's impossible to get broadband. Neither BT nor Virgin will, can be asked to provide it. This is not the venue to sort of bring this up specifically, but I will be contacting the relevant portfolio holder to see what pressure he can bring on to the providing companies to actually sort of finish off cable to Church Langley.
Well, just to your point, Simon, you're absolutely right, and it's not just Church Langley, there are lots of other areas, and actually it is a fundamental issue that if you are buying a house or you're investing in, what you actually want is decent broadband and Wi-Fi. So, and Kevin Bentley from Essex County Council has been hugely helpful in pressing this forward, and certainly the county councillors around this table and also anybody involved in this knows that that is a key priority. If we're going to bring new housing and new opportunities and new jobs, we have to have the infrastructure, and part of that infrastructure is actually broadband as well. So I welcome your comments, and if there's anything that we can do to make sure every resident has decent access, then that should be our aspiration, and I'll support you on that.
Thank you. There is just one.
To say was talk to your local county councillor.
I don't think it's a county council issue, councillor.
Essex County Council are in the business of actually providing.
With respect, they are only interested in the Superfast Essex programme, which is primarily for businesses or rural areas. It has actually been looked at. Thank you. What I wanted to bring up at this stage is on page 168 about people, priority 3, about delegated promotion and delivery of STEMC skills. There is a point down here about exploring and promoting opportunities that encourage girls and women into the fields of STEMC where they may be underrepresented. There is a general omission from the People's Paper about trying to provide or create employment for people with disabilities. There is a sort of general reference to, I think, health and well-being, but there is no specific target or aim to try and create or promote employment for, say, for people with disabilities. And if it's possible to set change at this stage, I would very much rather see that.
I think we've got to remember that this is a strategic document. What we then need to do is break that down into what are the percentages of these particular areas. And actually, regardless of you've got a disability or not, what we need to be doing and what this council is committed to do is to treat everybody equally and give them the same opportunities over these ones. So even though they may not be named in this strategic document, have absolute assurances when you look at the priorities of this council, it is there, and we are committed to ensure that everybody, regardless, has the same opportunities, and if we can help them, we will do.
So why are you specifically referring to girls and women?
because statistically, if you actually look, if you look at the, and I know you weren't at the meeting, but if you actually look at the economic statistics, out of the 85,400 people that actually reside in Harlow, 43,900 are women. But actually, when you then look at the business models and the activities, that is a complete disproportion to actually the reality of our community. So I think it's absolutely right and proper that we actually put that out there, that actually we need to get that balance right, and we need to work with the educationalists, we need to work with the businesses to change that around so there's equalisation, and currently, regrettably, there is not.
So did you look at the proportionality of people with disabilities who are in employment and who are not in employment?
The difficulty is that a person can be a disability who can be a man or a woman. That's not the issue. The issue is, at the moment, statistically, there is a higher percentage of women who are not being able to access real career opportunities. And we need to get that addressed in the same way. And whilst we have very strong advocates like yourself for disabled people of whatever their disabilities are, etc., we still need to talk to people in a very serious and professional way about the inequality that is happening in our society in Harlow today. And one of those fundamental ones, out of the 85,400 residents, is well over half of those are women, but when you actually look at workplaces and leaders, there is a disproportionate amount, and you could even say that for this council.
So your point about inclusive growth is noted. So,
yeah, you could use exactly the same, you get argument and exactly the same figures to do. You could use exactly the same proportions and figures in relation to people with disabilities about being in employment and unemployment. They are equally as important as women are in the workplace and in their own lives.
I mean, we can keep repeating each other's points. The point is absolutely noted. I'm happy to.
Please be absolutely assured that the issue is one of the council priorities, and we will do everything we possibly can. And I know that you're a strong advocate with, like many of the councillors and many of the officers, and we will work together to try to get that imbalance sorted.
Thank you very much. Look forward to that. Which brings me nicely on to my last question as to when the action plan is likely to be produced and where it will be going to, and when can we see it?
We need to get this through tonight, and then tomorrow we're going to then start developing the action plan. We've got a small group of councillors who are going to be helping us engage in that particular process, and then we'll be able to bring that forward. But we don't have a date at the moment that I can promise you.
Chair, just some brief comments. Of course, I welcome the fact that the council now has an economic development strategy. Councillor Durkin will appreciate that I have called for this at many cabinet meetings when it's come up on the forward plan. It's here, and I very much welcome the fact that there is a strategy. That said, though, I think it is very important that the action plan that comes out of this high-level strategy, and I appreciate that it is only a high-level strategy, that there is an action on the back of these warm words that are set out in this strategy. Of course, it is great news that Essex County Council has pumped investment into Harlow, and that's thanks to people like Eddie, Kevin Bentley, who've pumped investment into our town. Of course, I don't agree with all infrastructure projects that are currently in discussion in Harlow, in concerns of my residents, but I want to stick to the broad themes of what this strategy is about tonight. And of course, Harlow becoming a centre for life science, looking at the digital economy. Only this week we found out that the UK has secured the highest amount of tech investment compared to every other European country put together. And that's a national success story that Harlow should capitalise on with the enterprise zone and the fact that we're going to have the data banks there. Equally, Public Health England, the government investing in our town, should be welcomed too. What I found really interesting in this report is the huge growth in the business population in the town. Double the national average. Again, another success story because of government investment in local communities across the country. For me, though, I come back to this central point that we can't just talk about warm words, we want action, and residents want action on economic development. There is a lot of good news in terms of economic regeneration in this town, but we are looking on this council to have a robust action plan and get going quickly. Thank you, Chair.
Chair.
I just want to quickly go through that. So I too am very much looking forward to an action plan with named owners, dates and measures on them, and I will look forward to seeing that very soon. I think people around the table will know why I said that quickly.
I just wanted to reassure Councillor Charles that every single meeting that we had when we were preparing this started with action needs to come out of this. It's not going to be a talking show.
Yeah, go on first.
Page, right, so 15B is on page 172.
Yeah, just in case I think I start just by thanking a number of people that have been involved, particularly the scrutiny committee, obviously. This piece of work emerged originally from the peer review that obviously we had done a few years ago, and that was meant to be all-encompassing and looking at where we can improve. And I think it's recognised, somewhere we can improve is our community engagement and how we do that in strategy. Around the time we were lucky enough for the Local Government Association to be doing their New Conversations project and to approach us to be involved. So we were delighted to be involved with the campaign company and developing the toolkit. I think it's really positive, but I think like all of these pieces of work, sometimes we do this work, it's great, it's talked about, but it is about the action that comes afterwards. That's why we're delighted to be recommending this to go forward the next political year, May to May, to the overview working group to actually implement a new and come up with a new community engagement strategy that will come back to the Cabinet for us all to approve. But it would be great to get some cross-party working to see how we can all work together to better engage our community in different ways. And it could be a really positive piece of work, and the toolkit could be really positively used. Thank you.
Just a very brief comment. I echo what Emma said in terms of the pudding is in the execution of the action resulting from it. But I think the key message for me from this is that we need to make sure that we positively embed customer engagement, resident engagement, tenant engagement, whatever the residents of Harlow and businesses at a very early stage. That both the nature of the consultation and the objectives of the consultation are considered up front, not as an afterthought. And I'll make no claims that we've got it right. This was a piece of work that I was encouraged to have been involved in, and there are some sort of cultural aspects of this, not just a toolkit and a set of processes to be followed. So I welcome the work that's going to be followed on from this. But it is a serious intent to improve the way we do customer community resident and engagement. Any questions? Right, so the recommendation on page 174, A and B, that is both consider what we have done and that we're working to use this as a starting point for a new community engagement strategy. Are we so agree?
Agreed.
That leaves us with the minutes of the meetings of the Housing Standards Board and the Cabinet Overview Working Group itself. No questions, but so noted. There being no back.
Chair.
Oh, sorry.
As it's the last meeting of the municipal year, could I move that we place on record our thanks to you, Chair, for chairing the meeting for the year?
Thank you. Right. There being no other business, we can